It's Black History Month, so join me as I go over some Black history that's related to moto and SMX. So I guess a good place to start is the formation of the AMA, or American Motorcyclist Association. The AMA was a whites-only organization from its inception in 1924, and it didn't allow African Americans to join for about 30 years until the 1950s. There's a 1930 AMA membership application form on display at the Harley-Davidson Museum, which includes the statement, "Membership is limited to white persons only." And this, of course, didn't stop African Americans from creating their own counterculture, with the creation of African American motorcycle clubs that still exist to this day, such as the Berkeley Tigers and Black Panther motorcycle clubs. But these clubs couldn't participate in AMA-sponsored events due to the racial ban. But at least one black rider was able to evade these whites-only restrictions. In the 1920s and 30s, there was a hill climb racer, William B. Johnson, nicknamed Wild Bill, obtained an AMA membership card, which allowed him to compete around the northeastern United States and become perhaps the first black AMA member. Some say that he got his AMA membership because he had a white enough sounding name, or others even said that he claimed to be Native American. Either way, he got his card and was able to compete. One time, when Wild Bill was preparing for a race, an AMA official approached him and told him that coloreds were not eligible to compete. But Johnson produced his valid AMA membership card, and the official reluctantly backed off. Johnson not only competed that day, but he won in his class. In the 1950s, the whites-only policy was rescinded. But in 1995, the president of the AMA, Ed Youngblood, discouragingly said, "While we may have formally denounced racial exclusion, we have not yet done much to change the reality of racial segregation within motorcycling." As far as motocross is concerned, some important figures were Brian and Brett Thompson. Now in the 1970s, these were the first African Americans to have a professional motocross license from the AMA. And I found this local news segment that was honoring their legacy.
And tonight we introduce you to the Thompson brothers, who made their mark in the sport of motocross. Brian and Brett Thompson were the first African American siblings to hold professional motocross licenses with the AMA, the American Motorcyclist Association.
There had been a motorcycle boom in the 70s because of the energy crisis. And a lot of people were buying motorcycles and mini bikes.
Mini bikes were the first thing we looked at, and then it went from there. He got his mini bike, and it was just a progression. We just went from there to riding and then to racing.
The Thompsons grew up in Susquehanna Township, Dauphin County. They began competing in Marysville, and both eventually raced all over the country in the late 70s and early 80s in a sport that didn't have strong African American representation.
The Thompsons said that they were generally accepted by their local motocross community, with people that they knew. But when they went out to further races, that's the only time they experienced some racism.
Brian remembers one time when people began to whisper when they showed up at the racetrack.
And Brett had finished second behind me in the 125cc, and another African American kid had finished third, Thomas Kemmer, behind Brett. So the next time we showed up here, they weren't laughing anymore.
Brian recently became the first African American to be inducted into the AMA District 6 Hall of Fame.
Another groundbreaking achievement was made by Andy Jefferson. And I found this in-depth interview in Motocross Action magazine from 2022. Andy Jefferson started racing in the 70s in SoCal with desert racing and motocross. His local Suzuki shop gave him support while racing SoCal, hoping to get a factory Suzuki sponsorship. But it never came. The only one that gave him a chance was Mitch Payton. He was handpicked by Mitch Payton to be on his pro circuit Husqvarna racing team. In 1982, Mitch happened to be in between sponsor contracts at the time, so he didn't have a bike that Andy could race for the San Diego Supercross. So he told him, "If you can find a bike, that would be great, and I would support you in any way that I could." So he went to his local Suzuki dealership again, where he was able to borrow a stock Suzuki from them, and just went for it. And in 1982, he became the first African American to qualify for a Supercross main event. The interviewer asked, "As an African American, did you realize that you made history in San Diego?" He said he never wanted to be known as the black kid who rode motorcycles, but just wanted to be known as a motocross racer. "I never thought about being the first African American to race a Supercross main. I just thought, I can't believe I made a main." Later, he realized that racism did have a big impact in his career, and it was why he never got a Suzuki sponsorship. I found out later that I was never going to get a ride with Suzuki. It was never going to happen at the time. The Japanese were not going to help an African American race their motorcycle. It was racism. I never thought it really existed in motocross. I thought I was just like everybody else on the starting line, but obviously I was not. The interviewer asked if he ever experienced any other racism in his career, and he did share this. A couple of times I heard chirping about, "You're not going to take away our sport from us like you did basketball and football." I would say, "Dude, I'm just trying to ride my dirt bike. I don't care about the color of your skin. You shouldn't care about the color of mine. When I put my helmet on, you cannot tell who I am. I am here to race motorcycles, and that is it." Another somewhat overlooked black rider was David McLean, a standout competitor in motocross from 1979 to 1985. He was from Houston, Texas, and he was a pro motocross racer in the 500cc class, highest finish being 5th at High Point in 1984. In 2010, they calculated that he holds the second most AMA Pro points by an African American racer, behind only James Stewart. And speaking of which, we had James Stewart Jr. from 2002 to 2019, and he was one of the most influential riders of all times. Not just for black history, but for motocross history, period.
Are you the most dominant performer in any sport?
Yeah.
Considered the Tiger Woods of motocross, he had an immense influence on the sport, and he helped other African American riders and fans feel represented in this white-dominated sport. He's one of my favorite riders. In my next video, I'm going to do a whole episode dedicated to him and going over his career in depth, so look forward to that. Now, we have a couple black riders who are currently riding. The first one is Malcolm Stewart, and this is actually James Stewart's little brother, but he has his own successful career as a 450 rider on the Rockstar Energy Husqvarna team. And then there's Jalik Swoll, who's a 250 rider on the Triumph Racing team. He'll be riding in the 250 East Supercross Championship, which just started now. I also wanted to bring up an example of a female motocross rider as well. This is Tanya Muzinda, a young woman who is a current female motocross champion from Zimbabwe. She's been riding since she was 5 years old and has already made a name for herself on the amateur level. She's working towards one-day racing on the FIM Women's Motocross World Championship. I wish there were more examples, so I hope the sport continues to attract and make room for black talent. But with an expensive sport like motocross, that's going to disproportionately hinder families with less wealth. And historically, that's going to put black families at a disadvantage compared to white families. But that is why we must make an effort to celebrate things like Black History Month. It'll help make us aware of the inequalities that exist and how we can make it better. So if you'd like to learn more about black history, I'd recommend reading some of these books. So just a couple books. One is called Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. It was written in 2020. And then a little bit newer one is called Black AF History by Michael Harriot. And these are just two of the most recent ones I've read. Let me know which of these black riders you already knew about and any additional ones that I missed. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.